you don't know who I am, my name's Brian Kirsch. I actually am the network chair here at MATC, so I run the networking program. My specialty when I came to MATC was virtualization. So I'm an IT architect, but that was my day job, and I specialize in VMware products and virtualization. Now, for you guys, for security, virtualization, you guys use it today, you use it in the lab, you build some VMs, you do some basic stuff with it. That's great for a desktop, you're kind of limited to that. What I'm talking about is moving it into the enterprise space. So, to give you, just to be real blunt with you, who's the biggest manufacturer of servers today? HP, Dell, IBM, who do you think? Who's got the most servers in the world today? HP sounds good, right? Not quite. Who's the biggest networking company in the world?
Cisco.
Nope.
No.
Oracle?
Nope. Oracle's database. But VMware, for both answers. There's more virtualized servers in the world than there are physical. 80% of the world's servers are virtualized. There are more virtualized network ports than Cisco. VMware is a bigger networking company than Cisco. So this is not something that's small. This is not something that's we use in just like VMware Workstation, or we use at a very limited degree. What we're talking about is taking one piece of hardware, one physical server, and we commoditized it. I don't care if you run Dell, I don't care if you run IBM, I don't care if you run, HP. Once you put the VMware software on top, you now have the ability to virtualize dozens of machines, hundreds of machines. And that is actually a huge security risk. Now look, we use VMware Workstation today, right? You guys can pull up a Windows server in what, 10 minutes if you want, right? You want to play with Linux, build a new virtual machine, right? You have that flexibility. That's what the software gives you. The challenge is when you come to an enterprise, you might have one physical server and it might be running 100 Windows instances, 100 virtual machines. That's huge. Now, take a guess why we do that. Save money. Costs money to buy 100 servers, doesn't it? If you virtualize it, guess what? Save a ton of money. Now, the key with this is shared resources, okay? Now look, most people have a computer at home with what, a couple processors, maybe 4 or 8 gig of memory, right? Makes sense. These servers that you're using today have 500 gig of memory, a terabyte of memory, okay? They cost more than your house, but they can also run hundreds of servers at once. Because here's the thing, with Windows, if you install too many things on Windows, what happens to it?
Slows down, goes.
Bingo! Slows down all of those issues, right? So if we keep our own window instances and we just spin up copies of them, we isolate the applications. That's great with security, isn't it? We keep the applications separate. The other thing, you guys use them today in your virtual machines. I mean, realistically, what is a virtual machine? Files. It's a collection of files. Can you take the VMs from this classroom and take them home?
Yeah.
Will they work?
Maybe.
Yeah, they will. So what's to stop somebody from taking a server from their work? You take the HR server, take it home. Is that a problem?
Mm-hmm.
That's a massive issue. So virtualization, and just in how it works, has taken this portability, has given us this flexibility, but when you talk about it in a security concept, this is a nightmare. Because to put it bluntly, if I'm going to steal a computer, somebody's going to see me physically dragging it out to my car. If I'm going to steal a virtualized server, I can put it on a USB drive, and you will never know. Here's the other thing. If I'm a person that's disgruntled with my employer, I'm not going to go to the MATC data center and, start swinging an axe on the servers. Okay? I physically don't have access to it. But I could take my virtual servers, I could delete everyone you own. I could just delete your entire data center and it's gone. There's no undo, there's no recycle bin, you're dead, you're gone, your company is gone. That is a huge security risk. And I hate to tell you this, you are more likely to work in a virtualized environment than you are in a physical. You still have physical security, you still have the locked doors and all that. But the days of having hundreds of servers behind that locked door is gone. It's all about what's being virtualized, what's on top of that platform. And here's the problem. That platform is software defined. And what I mean by that is, it's the software that creates this virtualization piece. But software can be manipulated. It can also be abused. Okay? If I have one piece of hardware that's got a dozen servers running on top of it, and it gets compromised by a virus, that's a huge issue. That's a monster issue. I just gained access to a dozen servers. Okay? That's a real problem. So, before I started talking, how many people really knew what virtualization was or is? Okay? So, the idea behind it, I should have kind of led with this, but I apologize, a little bit of a head cold. The idea is, like Workstation or anything else, putting a layer of software on top of the hardware and using it to slice up the hardware. Everybody gets to share a little bit of the resources. You guys do that in your labs. The servers that you're running on, the NetLab appliances or VMware Workstation, is taking the hardware and slicing and dicing it. The reason this works, we got really powerful hardware. Guess what? Intel's not making slower chips. They keep making them better, faster, everything else. So, do you use all the resources of your computer? Not even close. So why not share it out? But once you share it, you suddenly lose that security wrapper. You see where I'm going with that? Now, you guys as the security people of the future and all that, this is going to be the world you have to live with. You have to have knowledge that somebody could walk in and destroy your whole data center if they have a bad day. I could delete 1,000 virtual machines in 5 minutes. And there's not much you can do to stop it. And that's a problem. You're going to have auditing of your administrators. Okay? The people that you task to manage this whole virtualized environment, you're going to have to audit them. And quite possibly restrict them. Because people have bad days, whatever. People get fired, have backdoors, you know it. You know how that all goes. I'm sure you've seen the videos on all that kind of fun stuff already. The problem is this is a lot easier to break. And the theft thing is probably the biggest thing. Because HR data, credit card data, whatever it is, you're no longer hacking it behind, the data center. You just took it home and you're working with it. You have all day, they have no idea you have a copy of it. Because any virtual machine, if it's a collection of files, you can cut it, you can copy it, you can delete it, right? That's all it is a collection of files. Go for it, please. Interrupt anytime, please.
Couldn't you see who, where it was copied to?
If you're looking for it. If it never breaks, why would you go looking? So here's the thing. If I have a virtual machine running, I could shut it down and make a copy, right? But nowadays, I don't even have to turn it off. I can make a copy while it's running, and nobody would notice. No one. Yes, there is a log if you know to go look for it. And that's the problem. If there's not an issue, why would you go look? That's kind of a real risk, isn't it? Now, for what you guys are going to start seeing is you're going to see more of these security roles. They're going to have to understand what virtualization is. Because it brings in a whole new set of risks. and it brings in some unique benefits as well. Okay, I'm assuming they know of perimeter security, firewalls, and all that.
A little bit.
A little bit. So you guys know, like, perimeter security. You got your firewalls on the edge, right? You do that. What happens when you get past the perimeter?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
IDPS?
Okay, the IPS or IDS or whatever they call them. My apologies, I don't know all the acronyms. But that tells you that somebody's in the system. Does it prevent them from getting any farther? What's an obvious solution? You put a firewall on the outside, what should you put on the inside? A firewall. So, if you really want to protect things, why don't you just put a bunch of firewalls on the inside?
Complexity.
That makes it pain for everyone else.
They got
Okay.
IDPS.
Complexity. What else was there?
Ease of use.
Ease of use. What about cost? Aren't firewalls kind of pricey? I don't know. I don't buy them, so I would assume they're a few bucks, aren't they? So,
You're using the hardware ones probably.
so let's flip it a little. If you go to your company and if most of your servers are virtualized, why is your security physical? Shouldn't your security be virtualized? What makes a firewall a firewall?
Blocks unwanted traffic.
But what actually physically makes it a firewall? Cisco firewalls used to be made by HP. And guess what they look like? An HP server. What makes an HP server a server versus at a firewall?
The software.
The software. That's what matters, isn't it? So why don't you take that software and put it into your virtual machines? Why don't you have a firewall in front of your VMs? Does it have to be physical? It can be, but what if I take 1,000 virtual machines and I put a firewall in front of every single one? I have 1,000 firewalls, each one uniquely configured for that specific virtual machine. Different ports are open, different VLANs, whatever the case. Every single server has its own firewall. And I really want to get good on security. I'm going to put a router in front of everyone. So the IP addressing is all the same for every server. I can do that in software now. My security, while virtualization causes some issues, has also enabled some pretty scary abilities. The traditional networking where you're plugging in racks and all that, I'm not going to lie to you, that's going away. If you're a hardware person and you love hardware, your career in IT is limited. That's a fact, okay? Everything's about the software. And for you guys especially, security, one of the biggest things coming up is software-defined networking. Meaning, I take the firewalls and the routers from the physical world, I bring them into the virtualized world. I put a router in front of every single virtual machine, a customized firewall, so that hacker that breaches my perimeter security, every time he's going for another server, it's a completely new firewall. The best way to take it is take an egg. You crack the shell, everything comes oozing out, right? Think of software-defined networking and these new updates and firewalls and that as a hard-boiled egg. Yeah, you crack the shell, but it's still pretty solid on the inside, isn't it? That's what we're talking about. This whole virtualization piece, everything that's coming to the data centers, or I shouldn't say coming, that's here, has enabled all kinds of things from the security side. Even though it's caused some issues with admins being able to steal, virtual machines and all that, it's also enabling a whole new set of security parameters and protocols. Things that you could do that to be honest, you physically just couldn't do it if you were dependent on hardware. And that's kind of the great thing about this. Now, I told you about 80% of the world's servers are virtualized. That number is never going to go down. Most companies are aiming for 100% virtualized. So those commercials where you'd see the IBM little one tower in the empty room, that actually happens now. People are tossing out huge amounts of equipment, and they're going in favor of this. And here's the thing. Most security people don't understand virtualization. They have no clue. And your challenge is it enables a lot of cool things, but you also got to understand the risks. And that's actually why Mark and I were talking, and he invited me to come and talk to you guys, because the rules change. It's no longer about the physical aspect. There's so much more you can do with software, but there's so many more risks. And the thing is, you take a look at IDS systems. You brought it up. Somebody did, right? That's great. How many IDS systems do you know can pull 80 gig of traffic a second? 80 gig. I can tell you how many. 0, if I'm correct, right?
I haven't looked at this performance statistics of them, but you know, there's some that
Or go pretty high.
yeah.
So 80 gig, not 1 gig. 1 gig is easy. 10 gig is actually easy. I'm talking 80 gig or higher. Because here's the thing. If I put all my VMs on one host, I'm not going to have a little 1 gig network connection to it. I'm going to have an 80 gig connection to it. And a lot of times, you can't just span that off and collect the data. It's physically too much. So your network sniffers, those port analyzers and that they all have to get updated. They all have to change. And you have to take a look at what you can do differently. Because the other piece to that is, it's not just the uplinks. If I have 25 virtual machines running on a host, they're running on a virtual switch. That network speed is the speed of memory. It is almost instantaneous. You're not going to be able to span that out to a physical port anymore. So once you get into virtualization, you got to realize that some things are the same, but other things are very different. And I hate to say it, virtualization is only going to continue because, to put it bluntly, it's saving a ton of money and it's incredible flexibility. You can have a virtual machine in 10 minutes. Done. You can't do that with physical hardware. So the virtualization piece in VMware and even Microsoft, that's not stopping. And security has to play catch up. I mean, I think security tends to end up playing catch up a little bit more than it should. It should be more in the forefront, but cost savings tend to be at the forefront. That's just a reality. So with that, this is a new piece to the whole security puzzle. The problem is it's moving at record pace. The flexibility is incredible, okay? You can build a dozen servers in minutes. Did those all get properly secured? Did they get vetted? I don't know.
Probably not.
Well, but here's the other thing. So probably not, but what about if they're more secure than physicals? And I'll tell you this. I could put everybody in this room, tell you to build your own server, and they would all be different because of you guys, the human element. Everybody would have a slightly different build, even if you all followed the same instructions. When I create a virtual server, I'm not installing it, I'm cloning it. They're files, copy, paste, I clone it. If I secured and I locked down one server and I just cloned it 1,000 times, they're all secure. You can't have a better baseline than that, can you? So that's a great benefit to it. But again, you got to weigh that with the ability of somebody being able to walk out the front door with your server too. That's the challenges that you guys are running into. And it's only going to get better in some regards and worse in others. And you're going to have to deal with it. And that's going to be your challenge.
What do these software firewalls do to performance of a virtual?
So here's the fun part. A software firewall operates in memory. Lightning fast. when we talk about virtualization, you have one server that could have a terabyte of memory, 96 CPUs, huge amount of resources. So you can throw all that behind it. And that technology, the virtualized networking, is called NSX. It is becoming a premier product. It is a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream for the company called VMware. It is probably one of the hottest things out there because of all these security breaches, the targets, all of this stuff. If you had what they call micro-segmentation, meaning every server has its own firewall. So, you know, this firewall has port 80 open, this one has 443. They're not the same. If you have that, your layers of security become so dense, so thick, even if you hack one server, that's only one. You can't get to the next ones in that. So the people that can administer that and can deploy that are making serious coin right now. VMware itself is a Fortune 500 company. It is a, go ahead.
How complex are the firewalls you're talking about?
Extremely.
Are they working on the layer 7 then? Application?
So the OSI model doesn't apply very well.
Well, it doesn't work that complex opposed to like these
You
IDPs
can
and
go
stuff.
from almost basically the physical layer all the way to the application layer.
Right, okay.
Because here's the thing. A physical firewall that can do, okay, when you look at a router versus a switch, really the difference isn't the hardware, it's the software, right? So if you don't have any hardware to really limit you, you can kind of do anything. And that's the great benefit to this, but it's also the downside to this. Okay? I don't know how many companies would love to be dealing with 500 firewalls inside their data center. But if you do it right, your security is rock solid. But again, that can also be a huge challenge.
What about malware that, I'd heard of malware that it knows that that it's in a virtual environment,
Mm-hmm.
and it will infect the host machine.
So that never happened with VMware, but it's been talked about in the lab. Here's the deal. If I compromise the layer of software doing the virtualization, I gained access to everything. But here's the thing. That layer of software is so robust, it's pretty hard to deal with it. And now if Windows 2016, the new version of Microsoft OS, your credentials that are typically stored in memory when you log in are no longer going to be in memory because that's a security risk. Somebody can actually open up the memory page and look at it. Your credentials are now stored in a running encrypted micro VM at the kernel level. It no longer shares the same memory space as the host machine. That is pretty cool. Meaning that you're now isolating even your login ability. So malware, whatever, can't get to it. They can't breach that virtual machine. So this technology is showing up. And you need to be ready for it because, to put it bluntly, you're going to be dealing with it. And for right or wrong, the virtualized admin, the admin that administers this, is going to be one of your biggest security risks to it. Because to put it bluntly, this is all software. And software you can delete. So you got to deal with the actual infrastructure and everything else, but you also have to deal with the personnel. And that becomes pretty complex. Any questions? Any thoughts? I just talked for a while, so.
You mentioned software firewalls. What other kind of, you outlined a lot of darkness out there, so what are the solutions that they're working on?
The software firewalls, the software routers are huge. That is growing like leaps and bounds. Because being able to put security right in front of the virtual machine and have it manageable. Look, we all know Windows has a firewall. We all know how good it is. Okay, it's also not going to work for the enterprise. But putting an enterprise-class firewall out there for you guys as security admins, you may go from managing a couple firewalls to managing hundreds. I'm not saying that's great, great, job placement, all that fun stuff. But it's going to give the company you work for more peace of mind. It's expensive, don't get me wrong. It's not cheap, but security and the breach that occurs tends to be a lot more costly, right? So your firewall abilities, your networking abilities, all of that doesn't go away. Those skills just transfer into this virtualized world. And the thing is, whether it's virtualized in your own data center or sitting on Microsoft's cloud or AWS, it's the same concept. You may be stretching your network from on-premise all the way out to the cloud. And you have to manage it and you have to understand it. You have to understand enough of the infrastructure to know where to put your security policies. Because the thing is, all of your policies and procedures all apply here. You just might have to put a lot more of them in because you have that flexibility to do that. Now, do you need a firewall in front of every virtual machine? No. But you may put them in front of all your production, and they're all going to have to be tuned. That also means you've got to collect all the alerts, the logging, everything else. You see how this all kind of rolls? So for you guys as security people, this can be kind of golden. If you have some basic a background in that virtualization piece, that gives you a huge edge up on the people that don't. Because that is what you're going to find out there. I mean, plain and simple, people don't do physical hardware anymore. That's just not going to happen. In the networking class, we make you go through A+, and that's great. You understand it. But in reality, once you get into the enterprise and the data center, everything's virtualized. And there's so many ways you can bend the rules. You can break a few as well. But, the OSI model completely applies. But unlike physical hardware, you can have software that expands through all the layers. And you now have that ability to tweak it based on what you want. And to be honest, what your boss wants, what the business needs. Go for any question? No? So that's virtualization in a, let's just say in a short term.